Hi, I'm James Murphy from LCD Soundsystem, and this is the track-by-track of our new record. The first song is called Dance Yourself Clean, which is a terrible title, but because I have to make the title of the song the thing that people will repeat the most, I think that's the line that's repeated the most in the song. What do I have to talk about this song? This is the last song I finished. This is the song I lost my voice trying to do. It's the highest song register I've ever sung, which the previous record was held by On Repeat from the first album. And after which I vowed never to write anything that high for myself. But then I got excited about a synth sound and forgot all about my vocal range and recorded it anyway. And then had to sing it with a voice that was completely blown out. But then I took lots of steroids. So I juiced for this record. So it's cheating. I completely cheated to sing this song. It's the opening track because it has a 3.5 minute intro, which is really, really quiet. So I hope people don't blow up their speakers because it comes in pretty hard after that. Hi everybody. The second song on my record is called Drunk Girls. I have often assumed that people won't think that I'm saying things exactly like they sound like they mean, but I often realize that people don't really listen to things, so it's not really about girls. I'm not like making fun of anybody or drunk people or girls. When we were in Los Angeles, all the guys in the house, it was mostly dudes. We had this amazing chef who was a friend of a friend. I asked if I was looking for a runner, like someone who lived in LA and had a car that could help us go pick up pizza. And then my friend said, oh, I know this girl, she's a chef, and she could do it. And I was like, I can't afford a chef. But it turns out this person was a fan of the label. She was a DJ too in a band and liked the band and had given up her apartment for some job that didn't materialize in some other city. So she just came and moved into the house and became part of the family, and she called us her girls. So we were the girls of the mansion. So it's, if anything, it's a song about funny genders and people being wasted and people who are drunk trying to relate to one another, which I always find deeply hilarious and predictable. Even in myself. I like drunk people. Nothing is more fun to me than two drunk people trying to negotiate some sort of like romantic involvement. It's always pretty funny to watch. When I grew up, I was really into a bunch of different kinds of music when I was really young. And some of it I kind of forgot about, and some of it kind of moved, you get into different types of music when you get older. And on this record, around the time of making this record, I started reconnecting to stuff that I was very interested in when I was a kid. And a lot of it's really dubious and not very, it's pretty questionable. And I was into like this, in Philadelphia, which is close to where I grew up, there were all these isolated scenes in America, like different areas had different sounds, which is why you have DC hardcore and like LA punk and New York City skinheads, and like every area had a different thing. But Philly had this like weird like Darkwave, like almost like Belgian Darkwave synth guitar drum machine punk, which I deeply loved and didn't know wasn't popular everywhere. And there was a band called the Executive Slacks from there that was one of my very, very favorite bands. And because that scene kind of dead-ended in that weird way, they kind of vanished. But I've always had these records that were as important to me as anything else as a kid. And there's a song called 30 Years and a song called The Bus that were on the first things they did on 4-track. And I actually mentioned them in an interview, and I got a note from them on MySpace, which I thought was pretty funny. They were like, oh, thanks for talking about us. And I asked for the tapes to try and remix it. And they were like, well, they're 4 tracks, and I don't think anyone has the tapes anymore. They're like cassette 4-track recordings. But I always wanted to make a song that sounded like that. And every time I've gone to make a record, I brought this record with me. I brought this in like DAF records, and I would listen to them and be like, I don't know if I can get away with this. You know what I mean? Like but I love it, and I don't know how to do it. So I just decided on this time that I was, living in this crazy house, I could just do anything and it doesn't matter. So I made a song that kind of feels like these super aggressive atonal synth punk records I listened to as a kid, and then made really dumb vocals. Nancy was very, very drunk doing the vocals, so she's just yelling. But it's pretty aggro, which I liked. All I Want is one of those songs, is the first song I worked on the record, and it's one of those songs that was in my head in a lot of different versions. One version was like very John Cale. I almost had like a country version in my head, which was atrocious, but I had it. And when I started working on it, I kept oscillating back and forth between this John Cale version and this country version with like these Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young harmonies and stuff. But then I just started thinking about playing more guitar, and that's the first song that I got a lot of guitar on. Guitar and piano, and playing with space, using space differently than I normally use in records. Usually I make them very claustrophobic and very small, and I wanted to try and find a way of pushing the drums back a little bit, having them not as loud, having them have a little more space. Just as an experiment, and the song nearly killed me for 2.5 weeks because I just couldn't get my head around it. And then I put it away until the end, and I had a vocal and everything was pretty much done, and had an outro. Has my favorite EMS synthy stuff on the record. I was on that. And then at the very, very end, when I was finishing the record, I was obsessed with re-singing it because it didn't arc as much as I wanted it to. So I re-sang it right before the Dance Yourself Clean song. So it's the so it was the first thing I worked on, and then the second to last thing I worked on for the record. So it was really, I hated it, and then I fell back in love with it. So I like it again. I really like synthy, heartfelt pop love songs. Really, really like. I did not stop. I was constantly listening to Eurythmics stuff and Bronski Beat and the first couple OMD records, and I loved these things. And there's something like kind of naive and earnest about them, and I don't really let myself. I haven't let myself do that in this band much. And again, I was like, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? People think I'm a simp or an idiot. Like, it's fine. So I decided I would just do it, and I panicked about it. And I had Pat come in. I was like, does this suck? And he loved it. And I trust Pat, so I've already won because Pat likes it. So I feel good about it. I was doing something very strange. I was surfing in Los Angeles, which I'm not really a surfer, but I really like it, and I got into it in LA. I was thinking, when in Rome, murder the Christians. And I was surfing with a guy who's in a much more successful rock ensemble than mine, and he asked very, very lightheartedly and honestly, he's like, well, are you going to make a radio hit on this record? I think you should. Which I thought bespoke of this is someone who very naturally writes songs that people love and has an incredible sense of melody. And I kind of wanted to be like, do you think I'm not trying? I'm not actively trying to make hits, but I'm trying to do the best. I'm just making music the best I can. I don't even know. And I suddenly realized, well, why don't I make hits? What is it? And I realized it's I just don't think that's, I think we don't, whatever it is that makes a hit is, I'm usually not that interested in, I guess. So we do the best we can, and it just became like a kind of a fascinating idea, about how we don't make hits. I kind of like that we don't make hits. It would be fun to have one, I guess. Maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe it might be a disaster. Oh, I don't know. Pow Pow is the song that I wrote to get back into the record. I wrote it in my head in Australia when Pat and I were on a DJ tour. Pat Mahoney, the drummer of LCD Soundsystem and my DJ partner, Mr. Patrick Mahoney, but who was misprinted as Pat Maloney on the door of our dressing room in Australia. And I took lots of pictures of that because that made me laugh. So Pat Mahoney stroke Maloney and I were in Australia DJing, and it just came to me, and it was kind of the song I thought was missing from the record. And it's a song that's been in my head, like the kernel of it was in my head for 5 or 6 years, and I never got around to writing it. It was always like, every time I was writing a record, I'd write Pow Pow. I gotta record this. But it was, it was like there were ones that were really fast and scrappy and punk, and there were ones that were slower and dancier. And then it all kind of glued together in Australia in my head. So when I got back, as a way to get back into the album, I wrote and recorded that song and made my manager want to kill me. I didn't even tell him what I was doing because I was late with the record. I was supposed to be doing vocals. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing vocals for Pow Pow. And he's like, what the hell is that? I was like, oh, yeah, it's one of the songs. So did you change the title? I was like, sure. And then finally sent it to him, and it was an entirely new song. But it sounds the most like, it wound up, ironically, sounding like an amalgam of the first couple of LCD singles. Somebody's Calling Me was a song written about a kind of an awkward situations that people find themselves in LA, where I was having a very stressful week, and I was feeling a little bit taxed by humans, and was having panic attacks about working on All I Want from earlier in the record. So I inebriated myself with anti-anxiety medication and went swimming, which is always a good idea. I did it with a buddy, though. I always go with a buddy. Do I just have like the worst life lessons? And then went to sleep, and in the middle of the night had a song in my head, like in its completion. And luckily, I had a 909, a Roland 909 drum machine with a little tiny guitar amp on my piano in my bedroom, and a little handheld recorder. So I got up in the middle of the night and programmed this simple little beat, and wrote the song on piano, singing and then went back to bed. And sometimes when you're on, like, let's say anti-anxiety medication, you don't remember. Like, I'll watch movies on a plane, like, 'cause I get nervous on planes, and I'll take like a Xanax or something and watch a movie, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, I guess I saw that movie, but I don't really remember what happened. And I'll watch it again and be like, oh, I do kind of remember this. Well, I didn't remember recording the song, and I listened back to it, and I liked it, which was fun because you get to be a fan. Like, I got to be like, hey, I like this song this guy made, because I didn't do it. I don't know who did it. And after the brutal 2.5 weeks of banging my head against the wall with All I Want, the next day I recorded the whole song by the end of the day. So like I woke up in the middle of the night, I started it, wrote it, woke up, and recorded the whole thing in the day, and that was the end of it. And it felt really good, and it has a very crazy synth sound that I really like. That's really way too loud. Oh yeah, that's another thing of this whole record. Almost every song has something that's just way too loud. The guy mastering it, my friend Bob, was kind of he's like, that thing that comes in the middle there, it's like really, really, really loud. And I kept, I was like, if it didn't feel like really awkwardly too loud, it was all wrong. So, because I always like that on songs. I always wimp out, but I didn't want to wimp out this time. So that synth is really loud. There's a bass line in it that is on purpose a reference to another bass line that I've recorded before. I wanted to make something that felt happy, like a happy ender of the record, and that's the happiest musical song on the record. And I wanted it to be about being, to a certain degree, about being in a band, in the way that some other songs I've written are about being in the band, and about how much I like it, and about how much it's a tough thing because I don't like leaving my life. And being in a band means you leave your life. It's just the truth. You leave your home, and you leave your friends, and you leave your dog, and you leave your habits and your reading and everything. And that's always hard. But I do love being in the band, and it's just a song about loving being in this band that was never supposed to be this big of a part of my life. It was always supposed to be a non-professional experiment. And I think it is still a non-professional experiment, but it's a non-professional experiment that takes up a much bigger part of my life than I expected. And I felt like the right way to end a record, like to, simultaneously loving doing what you're doing and really, really missing being home.